If I had to give one tip for a cheap, easy, healthy, fast cooking one pot meal, it would be it's very risky to be wearing a white shirt while cutting beets. Welcome back to my kitchen. So happy that you're here. Thank you for spending your time with me. Today is lemon tarragon chicken with a whole bunch of root vegetables. This one is a one pot meal that is healthy and quick, and it might just be the new dinner idea for you. Pretty humble ingredients I have for you today, but we're really kicking it up a notch with the tarragon and the lemon. Those two things make this meal that would just be chicken and vegetables something that your family might ask for on repeat. For 4 servings, it's less than $20 total, which makes it about $4 a serving. The best part is you can really inexpensively bump up the vegetables, and this meal will definitely stretch to more than 4 people. So I'm using root vegetables in this one pot meal for 2 reasons. First, because they're really hearty. They'll stand up to a hot, quick cook and develop a lot of flavor. Second, because they're in season. There really is value to cooking with things that are in season. You tend to get the most flavor for your dollar, as well as the most value, the most bang for your buck. So things that are in season and available more locally are usually the better bet when it comes to budget cooking. So today I've chosen carrots, potatoes, and beets. But if there's one of those vegetables that you don't like, you can easily switch it out for some other root vegetable, or even something like broccoli or cauliflower. Beets are kind of a sleeper vegetable for me. If you've never cooked with a beet, typically they are either boiled or roasted. And what I've done today with our beets is just peel them in advance, and I'm gonna cut them up a little bit. When you roast beets, they take on a beautiful color and a really nice kind of sweeter version of themselves, which means that if you've only tried a boiled beet and you didn't like it, you may open your mind to a roasted beet just one more time and see if it is different for you. But if you don't like beets, choose something else. Whatever your family enjoys, you might try in this fall skillet. So the method here, pretty simple, just a couple of steps. We're gonna brown our chicken thighs, and these are boneless, skinless chicken thighs, but you can also use bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs. In fact, that's great flavor, and they're usually a little bit less expensive. They require a little more cooking time, but they're a great option as well. So we're going to brown our boneless, skinless chicken thighs, remove them from the pan, give our vegetables a nice high heat cook on the top of the stove. We'll nestle the chicken back in, make a little bit of a pan sauce, toss it in the oven. I'm adding at the end some baby kale here because I like a little something green in a one pot meal. No special tools or equipment with the exception of a skillet or pot that can go from the top of your stove into your stove at a relatively high heat. Our oven is preheated to 400 degrees. So I like a cast iron, and I like it for a couple reasons. 1, I can get it screaming hot. 2, when I get it screaming hot, it's relatively even heat. So when I cook my vegetables, they can all get a little bit brown in just a quick time. It's also pretty wide and pretty shallow, which means I have more cooking surface area so that things tend to cook a little bit faster. You could use any other skillet that transfers from top of your stove into your oven. Just be aware that if you have something that's narrow and tall, the cook time will be a little bit different, and you're less likely to get some of those nice charred versions of your vegetables, which adds a lot of flavor. So most of this meal comes together on the top of the stove with just a tiny little bit of chopping involved. So I'm gonna get our chicken thighs seasoned up and browning in like a tablespoon or 2 of extra virgin olive oil on top of the stove. Our chicken is starting to sizzle behind me over about a medium heat. Again, we're just cooking those for a couple minutes to brown them on each side, and then they're actually gonna come out of the pan while we cook the rest of our vegetables. On the bench, I have about 4 carrots, about 6 Yukon Gold potatoes, and 3 beets. The only thing I'm limited by here is surface area in my pan. We want this to cook about 10 to 15 minutes on the stovetop and another 10 to 15 minutes in the oven. So I can't super overload my skillet with vegetables, or else it'll take longer than that to cook. It's no problem if you're not in a time crunch, but if you are in a time crunch, just think about the vegetables and how many you have and how big you cut them. So I'm trying to cut these veggies so that they are not mushy in the time that we have, but also so that they cook sufficiently to feel cooked in the time that we have. So the carrots I'm gonna cut into a little bit bigger slices. Next, before my hands turn pink from the beets, I'm gonna cut the Yukon potatoes. So I like to cut these in half lengthwise and then again in half lengthwise. The reason I do that is because I'm looking for a size of potato that will cook in the like 20 minutes, but also I like a lot of surface area for the potato to touch the skillet. That's gonna add to some nice brownness and a lot of flavor. You can cut these however you want, but that's the way I've found that works well for me. So I'm gonna do, call it 5 potatoes. Next, beets. So if you've never worked with beets before, you can buy them cooked in a lot of grocery stores these days, or you can buy them in the vegetable section of your grocery store. They come out looking really dirty, kind of blackish purple, and with a big, scary root on the bottom. The thing to know about beets is that they will stain anything they come into contact with. They turn it all pink. So I always use a cutting board that is not my butcher block countertop, and I'm careful when cutting. If I'm gonna roast it in the oven, the first thing I do is peel it. If you're gonna boil it, you can usually leave the skin on and peel the skin off after it's boiled. But then after peeling it, I just cut that root part off as close to the root as is possible. And I'm gonna do the same thing I did with the potatoes. I'm just really trying to get similar sized pieces of each of these vegetables so that they cook in the same amount of time. So before my hands get stained, I'm gonna give my hands another wash and then come back and put some oil and some salt and pepper on our veg. Chicken is still cooking, looking nice and brown. These veggies are the next thing to go in, but before I get my hands dirty yet again with beet, I'm gonna move these to the side and prep the rest of the components of our dish. I'm gonna cut up some garlic, and the garlic is gonna go in a little bit later because I don't want it to burn when it goes in with these veggies. This is chicken stock. This is for our pan sauce, so it's gonna go in a few minutes after our veggies have been on for a little while. Baby kale, just absolutely as is. And these lemons, one of them I'm going to halve because I'm using all of the juice, and the other I'm gonna cut into really thin slices. We're gonna actually cook the thin slices of lemon with the rest of the dish. Last thing, some tarragon. Tarragon is one of my very favorite herbs, as I've said many times before, and it does taste very different, fresh versus dried. I'd encourage you to try to find fresh tarragon for this dish if you can. It just adds such a nice flavor. But if you can't, no worries. You can substitute regular tarragon or even some other herb that you feel like might go with these flavors. And then truly, the last thing I need to do before I move us over to the stove, put a little bit of oil, salt and pepper on our veggies. Again, if you're using bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs, you may look how much oil is left in the bottom of your pan before you add a whole bunch of oil to your veggies. Decent amount of salt. Roll up my sleeves and mix these around. You just want to coat the veg evenly with oil. So one last wash of the hands and I'll see you over at the stove. Okay, here we are at the stove. Gonna check on our chicken. All we're going for is that the chicken is browned here. It doesn't need to be completely cooked through. If it is, that's okay. Chicken thighs are incredibly forgiving. Okay, next, veggies. The veggies are meant to go in a hot skillet, and we're gonna manipulate them a little bit. So this is just gonna hang out for like the next probably 10-ish minutes. I want there to be some nice color on the bottom of the veggies and for them to start cooking. So we're about 5 minutes in. I'm gonna give some of our veg a little bit of a flip, see if I can't get some of those sides that are down to be up and vice versa. And then I'm adding about a half a cup of chicken stock. I'm gonna add a little bit of wine too. This is totally optional. It's about a quarter cup of wine probably. I'm gonna spend a little bit of time deglazing the bottom of the pan. The brown stuff at the bottom of the pan is where a lot of the flavor is. It's called fond, F-O-N-D. And if you're able to deglaze the pan, which means add a liquid to a pan like this and kind of cook the liquid down a little bit, it comes off really easily. So this is a nice step in a quick cooking dish to ensure that you've got as much flavor as is possible. So I'm gonna squeeze in a little bit of this lemon juice. Then I'm gonna stir in the tarragon and the garlic. Gonna put our chicken thighs back in, including any of the juice that comes out of them. Look at all of that, that's all flavor. So I'm just gonna nestle the chicken thighs back in. And then, just by hand, I'm gonna nestle the lemon slices in. Only thing left is to slide this baby in the oven. So I have a rack centered in the middle of my oven, 400 degrees, and in she goes. So we're about 13 minutes in, and everything is exactly where I want it to be. So the last thing is to stir in and wilt some additional greens. So I'm just gonna stir in a couple cups of baby kale, toss it back in the oven for just a couple minutes to wilt this kale down. Okay, my friends, we are ready. Looking pretty good. A little bit of tarragon on top. So that cooked for about 15 minutes, and then I wilted in that baby kale that you saw, and that was another maybe 2 minutes, could have even gone less. So if you're gonna use bone-in, skin-on thighs, you probably wanna give them a little bit more time. The reason I would recommend sticking to thighs for this recipe is because thighs tend to be really difficult to mess up. Doesn't take much to dry a chicken breast out, but chicken thighs are pretty forgiving. So if you're a new cook or you're a little bit concerned about the timing, I'd definitely start with thighs. Boneless, skinless will take the least amount of time. Bone-in, skin-on will take more time, but they're cheaper and maybe even more flavorful. Okay, enough yapping. Let's give this a taste. Going for the chicken to start. Yeah, chicken is cooked perfectly. Still nice and moist. Potato that's turned partly pink from the beets. I just love a one-pot meal, especially when they're really quick cooking and really affordable. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it when you spend your time with me. If you like this video, please give it a like. If you want to see more cheap, easy, healthy one-pot meals, please let me know in the comments below. Subscribe to my channel if you want to stick around, and I will look forward to seeing you here next time. Cheers!